Right, I've hit the button. We're recording.
Thanks for joining us. It's taken Julie 20 minutes to get our computer to work.
It's actually taken me 16 minutes to get my computer to work because it took me 5 minutes to find the link to the Zooms.
And as you can tell, we're all at home because we're at lockdown. So normally we're in the office recording, laughing and giggling together, but because of lockdown, we're all in each other's houses.
Each other's houses? No, we're not. We're in our own houses.
A boy can dream. A boy can
I'd
dream.
quite happy. I'm that desperate to get out of lockdown. I would happily be in one of your houses. That bad.
But I have a note here, Chris, that you have a joke.
Oh, carrying on the tradition. I don't know if two makes a tradition of knock jokes, because Julie says that I do a lot of interrupting. Well, it's not just Julie that says it. My wife says it and my kids say it as well. But anyway, knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting cow.
Interrupting
Moo.
cow.
Okay.
Thank you.
Play the
Julie, you
music.
can play the music.
Play the music, sure.
Welcome to the Good Roundup. Good is a brand consultancy based in the UK, and from time to time we get together, myself, Stuart Steele, with Chris Lumsden.
Hello there, nice to be here.
And Juliet Murdoch.
Hello there, also nice to be here.
And we just talk about brand, and we're going to have a chat about brand today. And the topic today has been raised by Mr. Chris Lumsden. So, Chris, what would you like to talk about?
Well, it hasn't, because it was actually, I think, indirectly out of a conversation that we had, Stuart, but it was about what happens to brand in the digital world and some consequences and trends that have emerged in our opinion. Mm-hmm. And I've called it branding by algorithm. That sounds good, doesn't it?
That does it. Well, who doesn't love an algorithm?
Well,
charge more if you've got an algorithm.
And I've written a little blog thing about it as well. It's just a view from the sides, if you like. It's not exactly a major issue, but there's things happening that I think that are interesting. So it kind of, this branding by algorithms, a thing that I think is kind of leading to the homogenization of brand, and there's a kind of formulaic approach to how some of them are created. So that's kind of what I want to talk about. Before we dive into it, have you got any top line thoughts on that? What do you think? Is it nonsense or is it a thing?
I don't think it. No, I think it's a thing, but I think it'll be an interesting discussion because in the one hand, on some of the things that we have talked about, or you talk about in the article that you've written, I think are maybe a consequence of this branding by algorithm, as you've called it, but aren't necessarily a bad thing. I think there's some good things that have come out of it as well, but it's understanding what the role of it is and where it's a positive thing and where it's actually just an oversimplification of the whole world of brand.
I think it has some implications. Implications for us as a firm or businesses in this space.
Let's wind the clock. So when you're talking about that, give us an example of what you mean.
Right. Okay. Will I briefly stake out my position on it, and we can talk about it? Right. So what I mean by that is that branding by algorithm. The internet is changing, as we all know. It's no great insight to say the internet is changing things. It's changing every industry. Some of them in very, very dramatic ways, and some of them in more insidious and kind of subtle ways. And I think that our industry is being changed in relatively subtle ways. And there are, as Jules said, there's good bits and bad bits. So what I'm thinking is that the internet's changed the way that we brand, and the way that it's changed brand, and it's changed the way we showcase and transact these brands to an outside public. And what I mean by that, so when I say showcase, I mean it's very, very easy to go out and buy cheap logos and cheap branding and identities. In fact, in many pieces of software, it's a kind of featureized subset of a wider service, right? And it's done digitally, right? Or you can buy a logo for $5 from Fiverr or whatever it is. So there's no shortage of people offering stuff for virtually nothing. Or do you know what? You can do so much. The software is so good now, you can do it yourself. And we've seen clients who sometimes like to give us a starter for 10 on that front. So, and that can be embarrassing. So it's changed the way we showcase stuff. And then when I get to the point about transacting stuff, I think, this was part of the discussion we had, Stuart, that direct D2C, that direct to consumer model is powering ahead. It's a trend. And I think that the way that brands are created for that model tend to be very formulaic, because they're brought to you by platforms like Wix and Squarespace, who, again, I mentioned earlier, they kind of featureize that part of the process. So you end up, and they have it's a really powerful effect on how brands are created. So that kind of formula, which, because it's driven by AI, the more, I know it's the way websites and web pages and the direct-to-consumer, mindset or has manifested itself. It all looks the same. It all feels the same. It all looks the same. And you'll be glad to know I've got a formula for it. But, and it's sort of spawned this kind of genre of what I call sort of fast food, skin deep, anodyne brands. And the creative process has been somewhat surrendered, which will serve us more and more of the same over time. But the thing is, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And, I'll pause and let you guys jump in. But that's basically the kind of framework of what I'm talking about and how there's a change in that process. Does that make sense?
The interesting thing is when you mention things like Squarespace is that we have clients come up to us and say, we can get a site that looks this good for $10 a month and you're charging XYZ for that. And I think the interesting point of the discussion is looks this good. And I think that kind of design has been easily transferred to the user, that 95% of it's done and it looks professional. I think the kind of text logo is there and the text is laid out nicely and you can't really argue with it. And when somebody says that, I shrug my shoulders and go, well, if that's what you want for it to look good, knock yourself out. But I think what's interesting is how good brands become based on language and interactions, not just the way it looks. But I think a lot of the time it's basically goes, it looks good, therefore it's a good brand, when actually it's not about, it's more about how you act, or it's just as much about how you act.
I think because the other thing, which is kind of an extension of the same point, I think, and it's whether it's the building blocks of the identity itself in terms of color palettes and typography and graphic assets and that kind of thing, or whether it's elements of the functionality or experience of the website or the site that it's going to live on. It's, for me, the kind of interesting question, or an interesting question, is where the conventions around what makes something useful and enhances the experience, or just a kind of simplicity of typefaces and balance of fonts, general graphic rules that apply across the board. Where does that, and from a digital experience point of view, instinctively we all now know that the three little lines in the top corner of a site is a menu. You learn that over time. When does that
conventions?
When do those conventions stop being useful, and that kind of lack of distinction kicks in, and that kind of vanilla of just the same experience everywhere, or the same, like you say, a group of brands that just look and feel the same, and it starts to, that kind of, I suppose, if it's, just everything starts to look and feel the same. I think there's a point to where
it does, and it feels very distant, and it becomes more and more impersonal. And I think that rush to transact online and the D2C thing has kind of pushed the human aspect out of a lot of these brands. And I would argue that it's the human aspect, as we keep talking about, that's so important to brand.
Well, see, you say that, I've got a slightly different point of view on that, with particularly the direct-to-consumer model, because, and we talked a little bit about the kind of a lot of the subscription-based models that you see for everything now, from your weekly shop to your beauty box to your plants to your flowers, whatever it may be. And I think it's not to say that every product suits that model, but I think particularly for maybe for startups or for newer entrants to the market, it gives an opportunity to arguably provide a more tailored and a more personalized product to people, because you're taking out the middleman. Brands are able to personalize and tailor their service and their product to their customer, rather than it being a generic retail experience or whatever. So I'm not sure that everything needs to, do you know what I mean?
I think what's interesting about that is then, and this is something we've talked about, is that the product becomes the brand, and then the look and feel of what that is around that. So actually, the product is the brand. So what?
And this is the point that we are leaving. We're leaving the brand era and entering the product era, according to Prof G, aren't we? So can you open that up a wee bit, Stuart?
Well, I mean, I think the internet's been built on fail faster and go crazy and break things. And I think the going to market is now quicker than any other time. You can set up a shop within 20 minutes, but that is based on the idea of let's sell something. This would be good to sell. And as long as the product is appealing, serves a need, and all the good things about that, there's a lot of good things about that you can then start to build a business, maybe not necessarily a brand. And I think what tends to happen is that as that business starts to grow and become more successful, values are then placed on it at the back end as opposed to thought about at the front end. So
you mean once they find out it's successful, let's deepen it, let's make it a bit more, give it a bit more depth.
And the solid ones of that, you can see like Peloton, for example, which is definitely a product-based thing. They've always had a strong brand ethos on health and all that kind of stuff, and their brand is they've been consistent. Even when they've tripped up, they've been consistent in the way they approach them as a brand. Others, like Facebook, have definitely gone to market with a product, and then as the product's gone successful, they've kind of tried to then bolt values on the end of it, and I think it feels a bit disingenuous because you know the business, and it's also the kind of the power of the founder in that case as well, because you just know that Mark Zuckerberg's a bit of allegedly a creep. I have to say allegedly.
Well, that was the history of that business, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think so. Then adding values and just feels a bit disingenuous that they're kind and caring. I mean, they're supposedly going to be launching a fitness tracker. Would you want Facebook to have that data? No, because they're a bit creepy.
Listen, don't get me wrong. You're right, and there are always, these are massive brands. We're talking about Pelotons. Jules, you were talking about Airbnb earlier today as well, and and Facebook. There are exceptions to all of these rules. I'm just talking about observing little trends that are bubbling away, and I think. Yeah. Whilst there are these guys that transcend their sectors, of course, and they're fantastic businesses and brands, there are lots of them that don't, and they fall foul to these common mistakes that we see. And I think, that kind of flat graphic approach, nice little bit of clean type, as you said, Stuart, stuff that looks crisp and clean, tasteful color palette. It's all fed by the platform, and there's no human interaction. And in fact, I think even during the pandemic, one of the challenges has been that brands haven't really been there, they've not been able to offer that human depth. And I'm a customer of First Direct, which is an online bank, and they're part of their DNA is being able to speak to people. And they during the pandemic, they set their call centers up with people at home because it was so important to them. And I contrast that with someone like Sky. I was trying to get my TV fixed the other day, and you're just in this dystopian digital thing where there's a bot telling you that you need to do this, and you need to do that, and it just goes round and round, and you can't actually get any interaction with the brand, and that is incredibly frustrating. And as a customer, nothing says I don't care about you more than just talk to this bot. We're all off because it's COVID time, And I think there's something in that. It's just an observation that human touch in brand, as we talk about, the human aspect of brand adds a lot of depth and a lot of distinctiveness, and I think it's beginning to get missed.
I think the thing is, it's where when we talk about product and we talk about brand, I think I was thinking about this earlier. It's where does product end and brand begin? Do you know what I mean? Because I think if we were talking about, I think you mentioned earlier, I can't remember, maybe it was in your article, a brand like HelloFresh, where that's as a product, it's solving a problem of not wanting to have to spend time and energy planning meals and shopping for food. So part of that product is about the experience of the app and the delivery service and your customer service when things go wrong or blah blah blah. So, like you said in your article, Scott Galloway's not saying brand isn't important, but if you don't have, like Stuart said at the start, if you don't have those foundations in place in terms of values and what is driving and shaping that experience beyond just the physical thing that's getting delivered at your door, then it doesn't all hang together either. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, the other thing is, in that space, how many more mattress brands are we going to, direct-to-consumer mattress brands, can the market bear? It's like, just because you can doesn't mean to say you should.
Well, I know, but then but you look at, how many mattress brands can the market bear? Do you know what I mean? You go into a shop and you can pick between 1 and 100 different mattresses. So what difference does it make whether you're...
Yeah, well, I suppose the shops where you used to go and buy a mattress don't exist anymore. Really?
Yeah, well,
that's
they
why
do.
Where? Tell me. IKEA.
Tell them, Jules.
And you don't think you can go into a shop and buy a mattress?
It's not very many. I never go into those shops. Do you mean these big...
Oh, well, if you don't go into them, then obviously they don't exist.
Well, round by where I live, the ones that did exist have closed down.
There's nothing. There's no.
No, well, I mean in the bigger town, they've closed down.
Fair enough.
See, you slag Julie off about her setting up her system. This is what you're going to get, big boy. This is what you're going to get.
Listen, I've still got the astronauts up my sleeve.
But my point, don't even there. My point is, there's not, I know what you mean, because you could take, and that your point about the whole look and they all look the same. You know what I mean? Whether it's however many there are now between Eve and Simba and blah blah blah, that you could take the logo off one and stick it on another, and the experience is exactly the same. But it's not unusual to have a choice of products in a category.
No,
do you know what I mean? Just
agree.
because it's...
Agree. So the impacts of this stuff, I think, it's not all bad. I mean, I think there are good things, because your ability, as you said, Stuart, to set something up within 20 minutes and actually to look all right, that's unprecedented. We've never been in that position before. So it allows people to sell stuff online quite quickly. I think the challenge, though, comes when, as you were hinting at, Jules, which is like, if you need a bit of depth to your brand, and you need a brand that's going to be able to survive a complex organization's marketing requirements, you're going to need to do more work than clean type, smart headline, and a subtle color palette. Yeah.
Well, and that's where the distinction between, we were talking about this earlier, weren't we, between your brand, the identity element, so the graphic element of it, and actually all the emotional and tangible stuff that's, the touch points that surround it. And that kind of, it needs to, that's where the branding by algorithm doesn't necessarily work, because it needs that human touch and that level of expertise that's more than picking a color palette that looks good together. I think that's, but like you were saying, that then I think does ask interesting questions of firms like ours, or like we have kind of maybe evolved past it to a certain extent, but in, firmly in the design space, to say, what is the value that you're offering? Because why would I spend $5,000 on a logo when I can go to a design service online and have one that looks pretty decent for $50, what? And so I think it does force us to ask questions of where that value is being added.
That subtle trend change is affecting, I think, our industry. And if you are a business in our game and it's built on supplying identities and logos for people, then I'd argue that you're in trouble because of that very point.
Yeah, and I think you can lean it into, and I think the opportunity from this is, and we saw it last year, Julie, almost a year ago with AC UK, who had a really interesting company, a small company, had a bit of a generic kind of brand feel, but were growing bigger and needed something in it. And the interesting thing is that kind of young, and it wasn't quite a startup, it'd been going for a while, but they were kind of just getting into that phase where all of a sudden they knew they needed to explain their story about what made them different, as opposed to just being somebody who was selling things online. And what was interesting about it was what they needed from us, and where we added value, was they had that terrible word, a passion for this, but couldn't quite, because they were so wrapped up to it and still in that kind of almost startup mind frame, they needed us to kind of just ask a lot of questions to pull it out and put a mirror back up to them, and then they've got a brand.
I think, and that's the thing with, it's almost, in their case, it was almost the exact opposite of what you were talking about earlier, where you start with a product and it's just a veneer of delivering stuff. And then over time, you have to retrospectively figure out what your values are. They had it was a founder who ran the business. They were looking at succession planning. They were growing the team. The roots and the foundations of their brand and of their business were absolutely rock solid. It was built with a really clear vision in mind. But they hadn't, as they'd grown, they just hadn't figured out how to articulate that and that's where the subtleties around the language that we were using and that balance between being really professional and experts at what they do, but also being human and having that personal touch. That was the real value that the creative team at our end were able to add in that process. Because like you say, that we didn't have to make stuff up. It was all there. We just had to pull it out and kind of play it back to them. And it was...
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of these Insta brands, product brands are kind of coming up a little bit.
Insta brands, I like that. Insta brands.
Thank you. I'm sure Julie said it before. That's not where I get all my good ideas from. I'm sure this is from Julie. But I think everybody starts... I mean, I don't like the word passion. I was looking at a site yesterday. I was doing that audit for you, Julie, and I saw that somebody had a passion for roofing. I'm going, really? Really, roofing? A passion?
I mean, I do like having a dry house.
I know, a professionalism, a passion. As he was looking up, which I thought was great, he kept looking up at the roof, having a passion for it. I think when you get into that kind of passion thing, which is there, again, that's a veneer. You want to dig a little bit deeper into kind of there, and it's great that you've got a passion, but there's always something more interesting behind that can help differentiate a brand.
One thing, and I think it's a different point, but when you're talking about Insta brands, I think it's a good point. But I think one of the problems, with the fact that it is actually now pretty easy to put together a really professional, credible-looking brand and present it to the world via a number of social channels, you actually then, I've found myself clicking on stuff a couple of times going, whatever, those trainers or whatever it is, look great. And then you kind of do a bit of digging and go, this isn't even, it's either they've got terrible reviews or stuff doesn't turn up, or or you order stuff and it turns up late, or it's completely, all those terrible, like what you think you're getting and what you actually get, fashion brands that pop up. But because it's, I don't know if that's probably been fueled by the fact that, or likely has been, it's certainly not, it's added to the problem of, because on the surface, it looks totally credible, really nicely designed, and you're like, click, 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 I've spent £100 on something, and actually...
But do you think that the interesting thing is the psychology about that is that the more that we see stuff that looks like that, the more as humans we're able to, we see patterns, don't we? There's pattern recognition. Yeah. So you begin to realize this style of photography with this kind of stuff means that this is this type of brand. And I think that's the danger that you get into, that, we are quite sophisticated in our ability to deduce as human beings what, things, we put stuff in boxes, don't we? And we recognize.
Well, yeah, but you say that, but then you look at a number of, I might have bought a few pairs of trainers in lockdown, and you look at some of these trainer brands that pop up out of nowhere, and they look just as good as like Vea or anybody that are established and credible and worth or not worth, depending on how you look at it, £120. Whereas these other guys, they look exactly the same. Does that mean that the established brand is wrong? Just because you get into,
I suppose you're getting into a whole other area about, what's the value of the tick on the side of a pair of trainers versus a cross.
And this is where you get into the
equity,
the brand marketing versus the performance marketing, where you kind of then go. Yeah. So what you've then got to do is then kind of spend a lot of money on the brand to kind of go, this is a trusted brand thing, and then the performance marketing then backs that up. But to Julie's point as well, I don't know how long a business has got to last in that when you've got reviews, and the internet is both their best friend and their greatest fear, because as soon as you have a terrible thing, you're going to start telling people you've had a terrible thing. So you can't go into it.
And this is back to that point about the product. It's the era of the product. So the internet will tell you if the product is any good or not before you really have much of an interaction with the brand. But one thing I do know is I don't need this notion of subscription as well. All these brands that want you to subscribe to stuff. That's a challenge as well for me. It's like at some point you just go, do you know what? I'm fine with it. I'll just buy my razor blades at the supermarket.
I know, but again, I feel like I'm arguing with every point you make.
No, but you tend to do that anyway. It feels like just another day. It just happens to be Friday.
I actually went through this article a couple of times and tried to find ways to agree with you, and I did find a couple, but now as you're talking, I'm finding it difficult to.
And that's the great thing about this. It's just my opinion.
Well, but I think that is the point, really, because on the flip side to that, everything. I mean, I think, I mean, I have a few subscription models, a few subscriptions to things, either that you can't buy in the supermarket or because it's mainly a convenience thing. And it's not that it would suits for everything, but if I've got one less thing to remember on my shopping list because I can get it delivered every fortnight, then that raises questions around, environment. Is it, how carbon friendly is it? Or what's your, how environmentally friendly is it if you're getting deliveries for X, Y, and Z? But I think the subscription model is a positive thing in a lot of ways.
Well, that's okay.
I think, and there was an article, but there was, and I can't actually remember because I don't think I read right to the end of it. So this is maybe a bit of
my
a
article.
point. No, not your article. An article I was reading that was talking about subscription models specifically, and the difference between your needs and your wants and the categories that fall into products that fall into each of the categories, and how it makes it a more or less viable option as a subscription model. And I think there's things like, because I'm on a podcast with two guys, I'm going to say it anyway, just to, you can get a subscription for tampons now, environmentally friendly, Tom, and they just send you them out every month.
What has the world come
I
to?
know, it's crazy, I tell you, it's crazy shit. But things that, do you know what I mean? It's different. You're talking about beer, wine subscriptions, flowers that are firmly in the want category, beauty boxes. It's kind of, I really want my point is here. I suppose it's, I think it's
beer's probably more of a need than a want.
No, well, obviously. But I think where you've got, those products where it's just a bit of a nuisance to have to remember to buy, shampoo, whatever, I can see how, for me personally, it's like I say, it's one less thing to have to remember, and you're like, fine, it shows up when it shows up, and I don't care that the money just comes out when it comes out. I think, and interestingly, because I cancelled my Medium subscription the other day, because I've had it for a couple of years. But the more and on the one hand, and this is a slightly different point again, but the more articles you read in a certain space, the more it feeds you. But what you end up reading over time is and obviously it's designed that way, but what you end up doing is reading is somebody else's a slight variation in opinion that you've read 30 times before. So I'm like, this is too samey for now, I'm going to cancel it. And I thought it was going to be an absolute nightmare because I couldn't fit, and it wasn't. It was like, into settings, cancel my whatever profile, subscriptions, cancel. We're really sorry to see you go. Tell me why you're going. I was like, too many articles that sound the same. Sorry to see that. Doors always open. Maybe see you back one day. And it's like, do you know what? That experience is good because, like you say, I probably will sign up again at some point. I might, but at the moment, I'm like, I don't really want to.
So there's a topic. There's a topic for a future podcast. Why leaving is as important a brand experience as joining.
Yeah. Oh,
very true.
So if we come to any conclusion, it's been a bit ramble chat, but it was just, something and nothing. It's branding by algorithm. It's not necessarily all bad.
No, I think that's right. I think it's quite exciting to see things start up. If you've got an idea on a Friday, by Monday you can have it up and running. That's quite exciting. I think that's going to be very interesting as we come out of the pandemic. Well, I think there's hopefully a burst of creativity that can push that up. But I think anybody who's doing that, I would say it's not that you need to hire us to do your brand before you start. I think you can do it, but I think it's worthwhile going, when this becomes successful, what are we going to say that actually helps differentiate the product a little bit more rather than just it's a different product. So I think it's a great thing. I think it's just being careful, being mindful of why you're doing it at the start to get ready for the inevitable blow up when it all goes brilliant.
And I think just as a final point from me to support that, I think the other thing that for me is that it doesn't, beyond product, when you're talking about establishing a brand and thinking about it from a brand perspective, it doesn't necessarily mean hiring a firm like ours to spend tens of thousands of pounds. It's just being clear on why you're doing it and what your story is. I think, and again, there's a really nice little brand called Super You who make like superfood supplements and nutritional supplements and stuff like that. They've got about 10 products. It's a couple that started up, I think, just last year. They tell you a little bit about their story, a little bit about their background, and the principles on which they source their products and develop their products. And it's not, they offer a subscription service, which makes it slightly cheaper, bundles of stuff, and, talk about some environmental credentials and stuff like that. And it's like, it's probably 20 pages on their site, but it's it's not an overly complex brand that they've built, but it feels credible and it feels human, and it's enough to get, and it's also really, really nicely designed, which is sometimes enough.
So Chris, it was your article. You leave us with your final thought that Julie and I can disagree with.
I don't know if I've really got a final thought. Just as an observation, I think it was just and I totally agree. I don't with the points that you guys made. It's not. I don't think it's a one and done. I think it's just a sort of emerging trend that's that's there. And I think the point. I think what it means for our industry is maybe a bit more subtle. But and we ask, as Jules said, we've got to ask ourselves the question: Are we going further than that? Are we digging deeper? Are we offering a service that delivers more than that? Because as we said, there are clearly scenarios and requirements for brands that do go deeper, that can deal with that robust corporate world and the marketing team that's complicated. And I think we can look at ourselves and say, yes, we do. It's not just about logo design and the skin deep kind of experience. But as I said, if that's what you do and if that's the game you're in, then I think you need to change up. There's more to it, and it will be interesting to see where this gets to and how. I'm interested in this trend about this kind of this the extent to which digital and humans are digital expands its role into the brand experience, and humans are more and more removed from it, and what the impacts of that's going to be. That's going to be interesting to see how that plays out over the next 5, 10, 20 years.
Well, that was great.
Right, see ya.
See ya. Bye.